Hello, everybody. I'm Johanna Hoffman. I am the director and principal at Design for Adaptation, and I am here to start off this session by journeying with all of you into the future. We are going to spend the next 10-ish minutes exploring a vision of what life might be like in the year 2050. So before we start, take a little moment to find a comfortable spot for your body. Close your eyes. This is an eyes closed experience, at least at the beginning. And focus on your breath, on breathing in and on breathing out. On that exhale, you and me and everyone here will have traveled 25 years into the future and landed in January 2050. We are still in Davos, we are still in Switzerland, but we are 25 years farther into the future than we were just a couple of minutes ago. And this 2050 that we all have landed here in together is shaped as much by crisis, economic crisis, climatic crisis, geopolitical crisis, as it is also shaped by collective and systemic adaptation to climate change. So Switzerland has become a hub for a lot of that climate action on an international and on a local regional scale. It's a place where nature, for example, has been granted legal personhood, so that ecosystems' rights to thrive, exist, and regenerate are now enshrined and recognized in Swiss law. And its economic power has helped to position it as a leader in financing a growing array of climate initiatives. Regenerative power has got a lot more support these days. A lot of water, waste reclamation, and treatment strategies are now much more widespread in different parts of the world, as well as in Switzerland. Vertical indoor farming initiatives have been getting a real funding boost in order to address issues of food access in different parts of the world. So by collaborating with some different international bodies, the Swiss government promotes a carbon-based financial system that ties or seeks to tie economic success with climate action, with mitigation, with different adaptation strategies. So that's the general picture. When you connect to the place that you consider home, where you feel most connected to in this planet, what's happening there? When you open the door to your house and you walk down the street, what are you seeing in this 2050? When you go for a beverage in the morning after you get up, maybe you, like me in 2025, were super addicted to coffee. Is there coffee that's readily available for you to drink when you wake up and you want something warm? Maybe not. When you think about if a crisis occurs, maybe where you live, fire is a real issue, or flooding. When that kind of natural hazard hits, what kind of support can you expect from your community, your local government? And what might that government or that kind of support, what does that indicate about what political dynamics might be at play? All right, if you haven't already done so, please open your eyes. We're going to spend the next few minutes exploring some details of what this future could be like in a little bit more high-resolution detail. So I invite you, for the next couple of minutes, to see this prompt on the screen and play with that prompt. I'm going to give you, for each of those fill-in-the-blank spaces, 3 options. You're going to choose one option that I give you for each of those fill-in-the-blanks, and then explore what that resulting thing might be. So you can do this exploration on your own. If you're super excited to work with somebody, maybe ask your neighbor if they'd like to do this with you. But if you do that, please keep a little quiet so that other people can have their own experience and not listen to you the whole entire time. You can also do this on your phone if you have like a note app that you would like to use. If you're somebody who brought pen and paper with you and you like to do things by hand, please do so. You can also, if you prefer, do this in your own mind as well. So let's begin. In a 2050 that is shaped by mitigation and adaptation to climate change, there is either a law, a festival, or a snack. Choose one of those 3. If the word festival doesn't really connect with you, think of it as an event, a music event, a sporting event. Maybe it's a conference event. One of those 3. In this future where there is a law, a festival, or a snack, it's related to either water, the brain, or robots. One of those 3. That law, that festival, that snack that is related to either the water, the brain, or robots makes you feel either relaxation, disgust, or fascination. One of those three, choose, and think about what this thing might be. What is it? What is it for? What does it look like? You can think about what it may be, if you're talking about a snack, what it feels like to touch it, what it tastes like. If this is a law, what does it do? How is it affecting change? How is it affecting any difference compared to what was a reality in 2025 versus what is going on today in 2050? How does it affect you as an individual? And how does it affect people who maybe aren't anything like you? Maybe they speak a different language. Maybe they come from a very different place. There's really no wrong way to do this at all. This is all about sparking our creative thinking, the ways in which we explore what we think might happen in this reality of 2050 that we are all inhabiting here together. Another way of kind of exploring this thing is, how did it get here? Where there may be funding mechanisms that went into making, if you're looking at a snack, making that snack come to be. Where there may be different lobbyists who are involved if you're exploring a law. Different sort of organizational structures who put a lot of incentive into making this thing come to be that you are now starting to explore in this moment. And how does that maybe indicate or connect to change that's happening at different spatial scales? If this is a snack, maybe it has something to do with global food supply systems. How is that snack getting to you? Does it maybe connect to supply chains at all? Is that a way of maybe considering how those things might be connected? All right, we could spend a lot longer doing this if we all wanted to, but we also have a session to get to. So we're going to make our time in 2050 start to come to a close. Stop whatever kinds of exploration you've been doing and take a breath. Take a breath in and take a breath out. On that exhale, all of us, you, me, everybody here, we have time traveled very quickly and very safely back to 2025. Well done. Reverse time travel accomplished. What did that exploration of what this thing might be, what did that bring up for you? Turn to the person next to you if you collaborated with somebody on this. Turn to somebody who you did not collaborate with and share something. What did this thing look like that you made? It can be just a couple of words. Maybe there's a feeling that's involved. Maybe this exercise annoyed you and you thought it was a waste of time. That's also worth sharing. This is really about exploring what we think the world could be like in 2050, having that reflection for ourselves, and acknowledging that other people will be inhabiting that reality also. What came up? Again, there's no wrong answers to this. This is just about having an experience and a reaction and being real about it. If you were the sharer, now is a time to switch and become the listener. What did this thing do? What did it look like? And what came up for you? Okay. I want to thank you all for taking this time to travel into the future with yourselves, with me, with each other. As our time together draws to a close, I want to say that if you found this work interesting at all, annoying, frustrating, thought-provoking, fun, challenging, know that this is a way of translating what can so often seem abstract and impersonal about the future and translating it into high-resolution, more personal reality. Because the more that we can make futures feel real, feel tangible, the more we augment our capacities to refine the futures that we want to work towards as individual and very critically together with each other. So again, I'm Johanna Hoffman, founder and principal at Design for Adaptation, and I hope you enjoy the session to come. Thank you so much.
I got it. Give me 1 second. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I do need one little technical assistance on this. Does anyone know what number one presses so that Rosmarie can hear it in German? 1, 2, 3, 2? 2, all right, let me help. Let me see if I can do it. God, my eyes are, there you go. I think that should be 2. And then the volume is here.
Okay, thank you.
That should be in German. Well, I have to say something. I promise you, very light.
Loud, yeah.
But is it in German or is it some other strange language?
I don't understand this language yet.
It's High German. It's very, it's very proficient German. Can some German speaker help here? Because I would not be the right person. Let me kick it off because I'm going to start on the other end. We'll get there. Thank you all for coming here. I'm super excited to be here because this is an opportunity. I've been coming to the World Economic Forum for several years now. My name is Sanjayan. I'm the CEO of Conservation International. We're an environmental nonprofit. We work only in the global south. And our mission is very simple. We want to protect and restore nature for people. And I'm here, and it's my pleasure to moderate this panel. But I'm excited about this because this is an opportunity to meet the community here and have a dialogue with folks who are living the world and experiencing it in a slightly different way than you might find when you go into the Congress over there. So thank you all for being here today, and we have a fantastic panel. I'm going to just do one-line introductions, but then just go right into a dialogue with our community on stage here. So Fatou Jeng, who's on the far end here, is a climate advisor to the UN Secretary General. And she's originally from Gambia, and she splits her time between Banjul and London. Next to her is William Marshall, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Planet. Planet puts up small satellites, a couple of hundred of them now, orbiting Earth at least. And they do real-time imagery for the planet. And you can find that data made available in real time, do a lot of work with nonprofits as well as commercial. Next to that is the Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources for Mexico, Alicia Ibarra. And the Secretary, the Minister of Environment, used to, prior to this, was in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and was the Mexico ambassador to Chile. And now she's moved into this incredibly important role for the environment for Mexico. And then finally, next to me is Rosmarie Wydler-Wälti. I hope I did the name okay, who's the co-president of the Climate Senior Association. And she really, I'd heard about her and I wanted to meet her here today, but she led this, this lawsuit, essentially, in Switzerland, organized by the seniors to ask the country or force the country to live up to its climate obligations. And it passed the courts and then got hung up in Parliament, but obviously she'll talk a little bit about that. So we want to have a quick dialogue here with all of you and then hopefully take a few questions. So I'm going to start and be as granular as I can in terms of what I'm moderating. And I have the questions here now, and I don't. There you go. Okay. So I'd love it if each of you, and I would start with you, Fatou, and we'd just work down the line, could say one line about your work, but really more importantly, what's your experience, as specific as you can be, about how a community has successfully, or maybe unsuccessfully, it's okay to do that too, built resilience or dealt with climate change?
Thank you so much. It's great to be here having a conversation that's very important for us, our future, our lives, and our livelihoods. And in addition to my role as Youth Climate Advisor to the UN Secretary General, I also founded Cleaner Gambia, which is one of the biggest youth-led non-for-profit organizations. And over the years, we've obviously worked with different stakeholders, mainly vulnerable communities in the rural Gambia, and also young people and women. And obviously, we all know the figures. We've all seen how climate change continues to impact us. You look at our neighbors here, the recent wildfire in California. We see countries like Sudan, where people continue to be displaced as a result of climate change. Just last year, we've seen how over 4 million people actually faced acute food insecurity as a result of climate change. And I come from the Gambia, a city that actually inhabits over 35,000 people. And over the years, we've experienced severe environmental impacts. And my city, Banjul, is actually at risk of rising sea level just under 1 meter. So if we experience just a 1 meter sea level rise, my city will be inundated. And as a daughter of a farmer that has obviously seen how my father has actually depended on agriculture for years to actually support our education and our lives, and also coming from a country where over 70% of our rural population depend on agriculture, it's really important that there is more communal spirit, and it's important that there's more community resilience in adapting to the climate crisis. And with the work that we've been doing, especially around capacity building and awareness, planting over 35,000 trees across the country and building the capacity of over 4,000 women and young people. One thing I'll say that always stuck to me in terms of community resilience is the fact that most of the time when we implement activities, we fail to acknowledge the local and traditional knowledge of people in communities that are impacted by climate change. For instance, some of these are mostly farmers that has over the years been able to understand how to manage their lands. But when we implement projects, they are not included in these conversations. Their local and traditional knowledge are actually not included or captured in conversations that we have around climate adaptation. And one thing that I actually see or love to see in terms of especially building community resilience is how well, especially in our transition to renewable energy, but most especially in adapting to the climate crisis, is seeing more involvement of traditional local people and smallholder farmers in the conversations. Because, for instance, less than just 1% of global funding goes to small-scale farmers. And these are people that supply us with food. These are the people that actually help us with food to sustain ourselves and food security. But they are mostly left out in the conversations. And I've seen from my work how they've always come together as a community to always find solutions to the climate crisis. And I know you are looking at me, that time is almost up. But I just wanted to share an example. In 2020, there were a group of women farmers in Gunjur. So Gunjur is a coastal community, but also a community where we have lots of women farmers. There was a time where a corporation wanted to actually expand their activity and wanted to take over the lands of these women farmers. Because obviously we're a country that we're still facing some patriarchal norms and tradition, and it was difficult for these women to actually get back their farmlands. But when we heard about it, we were able to mobilize different stakeholders, including politicians, advocates, and also women farmers from other communities. We all came together, showing the power of community to actually support us in not only about the invasion of corporations, but also to build a stronger bond in terms of our adaptation capacity. And because of how we were able to mobilize each other and different stakeholders and partners, these women farmers were able to get their land back from a corporation that wanted to expand their corporation.
Fatou,
that is one thing.
So let me ask you, that when you go to Gambia, or even in Banjul, do most people acknowledge climate change?
Yes, now we're seeing more people actually acknowledge climate change, because before, we see climate change impacting us, like heat waves.
Yeah.
We experience that a lot. You see someone say, oh, it's very hot, and we fan ourselves. But they wouldn't really acknowledge that it's because of climate change.
But now it's more...
But now we're seeing some level of awareness in communities,
yeah,
which is very important, because climate, you cannot really be able to effectively ensure climate action without citizens being aware,
sure,
and know what's happening.
And then the group of farmers who came together to do something about it, the women group, what sparked them to come together? Like, why them?
Because that's what they've known all over. Like, that's what they've always known. Because these are women farmers that have been engaged in...
They self-organized?
They self-organized. This is something that is their main source of income. They've been involved in this for over 30 years. And in my country, women actually wake up as early as 3 to 4 a.m. These women farmers, they take their produce, go to the market, and sell this produce to be able to send their children to school, etc. So they understand the value of how this actually impacts them and their lives, and they were able to really self-organize,
right,
which was quite a remarkable thing.
Right, right. So, well, sort of on the other end of the spectrum here, right? So you are you in California, Texas now? Where do you live?
California.
California, all right. So you're in California, you run this amazing company, and you put satellites in space and do that all the time. Tell me about something specific about how communities or your experience in terms of actually doing something to mitigate or adapt to the climate crisis.
Well, firstly, let me give a tiny bit of perspective. Satellites are very far away, but they're helping people day to day on the ground. So we have 200 satellites. They image the whole Earth every day. We track lots of changes. We do a lot of work in tracking and stopping deforestation, tracking the coral reef systems, trying to stop illegal fishing, and helping countries with disasters. But actually, you know, the basic premise is you can't manage what you don't measure. How can we have smarter action if we don't have the information about what's going on? If we don't know where the deforestation is taking place, we're not going to stop the deforestation. I was just with a community in the depths of the Ecuadorian Amazon a couple of weeks ago, and they manage a large area of land, 35,000 hectares, but they don't know where encroachment might be. So we're providing them with satellite imagery so that they know where the illegal logging road is coming in, so that they can stop that. But to give you a most concrete example, of course, with climate comes more extreme weather events. And for that, our satellite data, because we image the whole Earth every day, we quickly, after a disaster, can help recovery efforts. So in the Los Angeles tragic fires that have been happening, not only did we provide satellite imagery within a few hours to the relief operators there, but also with Microsoft, we did AI for Good Lab, we did a building-by-building damage assessment within just a number of hours And the goal is to help those relief operators decide which places to help with medicine and recovery efforts as quickly as possible. Now, what's more important, so these technologies may seem distant, but they can really help people on day-to-day on the ground. What's coming is we just launched some new satellites that can have AI that they can run on the edge, so that we can actually do that within minutes rather than waiting hours for that. But what's more important is with disaster response is, of course, getting ahead of that. So we've been doing a lot of work with CAL FIRE in California and PG&E, which was having a lot of trouble where there was encroachment.
PG&E is the main electricity provider in California.
And because what was happening is the wind, when it was extreme weather, it would blow the trees into the power lines, it would spark a fire. We have all these fires in Northern California. And PG&E now, we help them monitor all the millions of kilometers of power lines and check that there's not encroachment, and then they tell them where to go and stop that. Unfortunately, that was not happening in LA. And we could do that and then get ahead of this and reduce the probability of these fires. We can see where the undergrowth is, there's too much undergrowth, where the fire lanes are needed. So you can do preventative work. We can do similar works in flooding. So we can tell the soil moisture in the top 10 centimeters of soil. So if you know that if it's saturated, that the next time there's rain, it's very likely to flood. So you can have some sort of warning to help prepare communities for a potential flooding event.
Do you find communities coming to Planet for help on a constant basis? I mean, as the words got out that you have this network, do you get lots of incoming requests?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've built a platform to try to enable them to help themselves with our data and the tools. You know, satellite data can be overwhelming, and it's fine. We work with NASA on climate variables, but of course they've got loads of people with skills with satellite data. We're trying to make it easier, so it's not just for the teams that have tens of people with PhDs in satellite imagery processing, but rather make it easier to use. So one of the amazing things is happening now is how AI can help all of this. So, I think of how Google indexed the internet and made it searchable. We're trying to make the planet searchable. We're indexing what's on the Earth, and the AI can make that easy. And that can make it such that anyone can just type in a query and get answers about what's going on. So where we're going is going to be much easier. It's going to be, so we're not only trying to provide our satellite imagery to those that need it, so democratize access to satellite imagery, but build tools that democratize the extraction of value from that to make it easier so anyone can get value out of that. A farmer, somebody trying to protect their ecosystems.
Right. Alicia, you have vast experience, and now you have this incredible, one of the top 10 biodiverse countries in the world. Obviously on the front lines of climate impact. You have coastlines on both sides, you have a desert, you have mangroves, and you have a huge population. What's something specific that you could say, here's a way in which I see a community or a group of individuals really taking action to mitigate or adapt to climate?
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I'm so glad to be here this afternoon and share with all of you some experiences. First of all, I have to say that optimism has to come precisely from community experiences, because the world is not going very well, frankly speaking, because 10 years after the Paris Agreement, we're making very little progress in terms of climate change. And 15 hours after Trump announced that he's going to step out of the Climate Change Convention, I think we cannot, again, we have very little confidence that it's going to be the big companies or the big governments, the ones who are going to make the change. So thank you for the question to all of us about what communities can really do. And I have one example which your organization has participated in Mexico City. Mexico City is a very huge city. 9 million people live in Mexico City. In the metropolitan area, we're talking about 35 million people. But one experience that I think is interesting is that Xochimilco, those of you who have been in Mexico or who have not been in Mexico, you should visit Xochimilco because it's a great place, but it was in great danger. It was in very great danger because it was a flooded area, because Mexico was in, as you you may remember in history, we were built as Mexicans in a big water environment. So Xochimilco is a place where indigenous peoples used to plant their food in small chinampas, what they call chinampas. So this is a very ancient practice, but they were running out of water, actually. So the way it was solved is to build a very huge wetland around Xochimilco and to bring back water, but by building up wetlands, and it was done with Conservation International, by the way, together with the communities and together with the local government. So now, if you go to Xochimilco, you will find out that again, Xochimilco has come back to what it was almost 400 years ago, and also you can go in a canoe, let's say, it's recovered totally, the lake has recovered wonderfully, and you can also see how the local people are selling flowers and food, and so it has been a total recovery, but it has been done by the community itself. Of course, the government put some money in it. Now let me give you a bad example, a very bad example, Acapulco. Everybody has heard about, I hope so. Acapulco is one of the most interesting touristic areas in Mexico, actually. But it was hit by Otis and then by Hurricane John. And it was almost destroyed because of climate change, because the hurricane came on level 3 and then level 4. And then very close to the coastline, it became level 5, which is the largest one, in a few hours only. And the people were simply not prepared. So Acapulco, the coast, was totally destroyed because of the lack of mangroves, because of the lack of forestry, because of the lack of wetlands. It was only condominiums and hotels. It was almost destroyed. It's now been, I mean, it's in the recovery process, but it was, you know, it's like what I would say is the antithesis of a community, Acapulco, because it's all built by tourism and condominiums and hotels and very concentration, inequality. So now we are facing the job of recovering a place that has so much inequality, so much, let's say, things to be done, that what we need to build there is, again, the weave, the social weave. We have to, again, build the community in Acapulco, and that's one of the jobs that we have to do ourselves by bringing the community together to restore their own. As you very well said, Mexico has 11,000 kilometers of coastline. We are in danger if we don't bring the communities together, for example, to bring mangroves back to the equation. But it's a community job, so that's why I have a good example and a bad example.
That's great. And for those of, I had a chance and the privilege of visiting Xochimilco last year, and I've been to Mexico City many times, and I never realized that, number one, it was built on a wetland, but within the city limits, within the bigger city limits, there's this 9,000 hectare wetland. And it is the most amazing morning or day you could spend in a big, big city to go and see
in a canoe?
In canoes or kayaks or boats. And the communities there grow over 120 different types of vegetables because it is so productive. And no fertilizer, no inputs, just the water from the canals. That allows this incredibly productive. It really should be like a world. We should make that like one of the 10 wonders of the world.
So.
We really should try. Okay, Rosmarie. Now coming to someone from here, local. You've fought the good fight here. You know, from your experience, you know, tell us, you know, how a community organizes to try to deal with an issue of around climate resilience or adaptation. What can you share with us from your experience?
We have chosen a different focus. We decided or thought about what can we do to fight climate change. So it wasn't about resilience. We tried to grab the issue at its root. And we decided to pair up with Greenpeace. In 2016, we started to set up a foundation or an association, because Greenpeace decided to go to court against the Swiss government because they thought the Swiss government didn't do enough to fight climate change. And they thought something needed to be done. So they needed a public, they needed somebody who was able to go to court. And therefore, they went out and they looked at who is mostly impacted by heat waves, for instance. We have floods as well, but maybe a little bit less as in other places. Also, forest fires are not as dominant. But we elderly women, we are mostly impacted, we are mostly vulnerable when it comes to heat waves. We are the first to die when we have heat waves over a longer period of time. And therefore, we were approached by Greenpeace. And on the basis of this, in 2018, we founded our association. We went through all the instances that were required in Switzerland in order to sue, and this is only promising success if you are mostly impacted, if you're mostly vulnerable. So we addressed first the Ministry of Environment, but we were refused. They basically addressed us to the court in Lausanne. They said, well, you're still in good health, you don't have a chance. And they talked about we needed heat waves which needed a plus from 1.5 and more degrees. So oftentimes, so nobody wanted to hear and listen to us, and therefore we went to Strasbourg, to the European Court of Human Rights. We were invited into the large chamber. So all 17 judges listened to us and finally came to a sentencing. We were treated with priority, which isn't usually the case. And in April, we received the sentencing in April 2024. We thought that we might be successful, but we had definitely an absolute overall success. There was only one voice that was against us, and everything was based on Article 8, which says that every human has the right to live a good life, a proper life, and this was violated because in our case of heat waves, and it was found that this was going against a basic human right, meaning essentially that our government doesn't do the maximum in order to keep us safe. Finally, globally, we received congratulations. We were invited to interviews and similar, but the Swiss government, for instance, didn't want to acknowledge this sentencing. They said, well, this is just a foreign court. It's motivated very much by activism. They didn't interpret Article 8 in a correct way. But this is an article that goes back to the 1950s. At the time, nobody talked about climate change yet. And then we hoped for the highest court in Switzerland that they would agree with the sentencing. But here we heard that, yes, enough is done in Switzerland. We are dealing with enough new laws. And yeah, we don't need to deal with all of that. So implementation is a whole different story in Switzerland yet. Now, Switzerland need to present to the European Union a specific roadmap, and this will be in the media next week. We will the Federal Council is supposed to do, though, and this will discuss then later on. We are convinced, and we're also working with experts, we are convinced that we are in the right and that Switzerland needs to do a lot more when it comes to climate change. This is just a very soft sentencing, in our opinion. Switzerland was sentenced, as we see it, but obviously it's the same in all other European countries, 46 countries.
there are many things that you could have got involved in, and perhaps one might imagine, at your age, you would not want to take on something like this. You might want to spend retirement in a nice place or on holiday. What made you act? What was the motivation for you to say, this is not someone else's responsibility, I'm going to be the co-leader or co-president of this, and put your time and effort into this?
I have been an activist since the 1970s, and at the time I was very active to fight nuclear power plants. I was also in several feminist movements. We wanted to fight for a healthy environment, for organic farming and similar. And I like reading and also find out about expert opinions, also people who tell me about the future. And yes, we've heard it earlier on, Gambia and other countries, they are very much impacted. And yes, this just appeals to my inner justice and my sense of inner justice. We are responsible in our countries for the disasters that happen in other countries also when it comes to island states and similar. And therefore, we need to act, we need to take action, and we need to fight the climate disaster. It's advancing with an incredible pace, a lot quicker than this was calculated in the past.
I want you to keep your answer brief because I'm mindful of time and I do want to open this up to the audience as well. But could you, one idea, what's one idea you're excited about for the future, say in the next couple of years that you see out there that you think that might work? What's on top of your mind, Fatou?
On top of my mind is intergenerational collaboration. If you look at the panel, it's diverse people, different generations. And I always say that, in as much as the government is doing something, the private sector is doing something, the NGOs are actually doing something. We can't really all do it individually. In order to address the climate crisis, we need strategic partnership and collaboration between different generations, because we see around the world the power young people actually have been able to have over the years. For instance, in Europe, we've seen how young people mobilized, millions of them on the streets protesting, which has actually influenced elections. You go to Africa, you see how young people are innovators. They're in the communities, mobilizing people, educating people, campaigning, and just leading actions. So you're seeing how significantly we're really on the ground at the grassroots level working with communities. So in different parts of the world, we see what young people actually bring to the table. But what has been lacking is intergenerational collaboration, especially effective ones. When you sit in conferences, sometimes we see how young people are tokenized, we brought to the table, or in meetings actually take photos, but our responsibility is beyond that. We have so much to bring to the table, and that is one thing I am excited about. More intergenerational dialogues and partnership in spaces like this, and also looking at our funding models. Yeah. Because when you look at the existing funding models right now, it's quite traditional and rigid, and it makes it really difficult, especially for young people and the civil society space, to actually access this funding. Okay. So I'm very excited about a more inclusive and participatory funding models where local communities and young people are able to access it and improve and enhance their innovation. So partnership, but a more participative funding model as well.
Great, great. I think you're absolutely right about that intergenerational collaboration. I think power is very sticky and it takes a lot to actually change a paradigm, and I think you sometimes then see the backlash. And I think by creating that intergenerational network, you tend to be more resistant to the backlash that inevitably comes to any movement. Will, what are you excited about? Anything new going? A lot of new things, but what's the one thing that you think, that could really be something big?
Well, I've touched a little bit on AI. Yeah. I'm very excited about how that can democratize access to understanding our planet in this queerable Earth concept. But let me touch on a different one. Intergenerational collaboration, I really support as well. And but in partnerships between non-profit, governments, and private sector. I think we've got to form these coalitions. A great example of that for us recently was a non-profit organization in California wanted to help measure methane resources around the world. NASA had an incredible instrument that can do that, but it was going to cost a lot of money to put it into space. We have really cheap satellites, so we all three teamed up. There's a non-profit, a government, and so we just flew that sensor from NASA JPL into space on our satellite, made it much lower cost, like 10 or 100 times lower cost. Only a few million, but that's better than hundreds of millions, so it's a step. And that satellite has now started detecting methane leaks all around the world. And again, you can't manage what you don't measure. Yeah. And we already started detecting methane leaks, and incredibly, like we just mapped them, and we've given the data away on this website. And already some operators were like, oh, I didn't realize I had these leaks. This was one in Texas that had a leak that was 7,000 kilograms of methane per hour, which is the equivalent of driving 10,000 cars all at once, or about 300,000 cars taken off the road, if you take into account the fact that not all of them are driving at any one time. So a huge impact from this one leak that they turned off. And we could detect thousands of those, and the idea is to help that, So I think that's the kind of benefit that can come from a public-private partnership.
Right. Minister, I know what you're not excited about, probably dealing with your neighbor to the north. But what are you excited about, and you think is on the horizon that...
Not about our neighbor, I must admit, but I'm very excited about environmental justice. And I share very much Rosmarie. I like very much what she's doing, saying, and I think we need more of that. All generations, we need to fight more loudly. I think we have to get out of our comfort zone and fight loudly about environmental justice, which is not there. And I'm very concerned that the future is not going to be, let's say, easy for the young people. And we have a debt to the young people, at least my generation has. And so the thing that gives me a lot of hope is when I hear young people come on with proposals, with things that they want to change and they want to do. Because I do believe that we are in trouble. We are in huge trouble in the world, fragmented. So justice for me is what I'm looking for. And of course, if you tell me one thing that I am very excited about is to have a president, a woman president, the first woman president in 200 years in my country. So, woman, we have to make them
And a climate scientist.
And a climate scientist. And a climate scientist.
And a climate scientist.
She might be the first climate scientist to be a president.
Absolutely.
I know other women have the state, right?
No, Merkel was also a scientist.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
course,
and she was a
that's
physicist.
True. Yes, that's
so,
right.
No. But she's also good. I mean, Claudia Sheinbaum is great. She's a climate scientist and the president.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Right. What's next for you, Rosmarie? What are you looking forward to in the next year or two?
Also,
Well, to come back to young people, what you just said, because I also feel responsible. We are the generation of the baby boomers, and that is reason enough to participate and change what we can. We do many things with young people, discussions in plenaries. We go to the marches together with young people, the climate protests, the winter march to Davos together with young people, because we criticized the WEF for many years, because many powerful and rich people come here. They have all the possibilities in their hands, and we can only hope that they see the urgency, at least, and they will do something. I'm really happy that you, the WEF, invited me instead of speaking against the WEF. I'm sitting here, and I hope that this can be understood by the important people who can change something and organize something together. We cannot simply find solutions in each country individually, but have to do it together.
About 6 minutes before we open this up to the audience for some Q&A, so just minding the time there, you know, there's a lot of bad news if you look. You don't even have to look, it'll come to your doorstep. And everywhere you turn, you are bombarded by messaging that really sometimes, even for me, who I've been in this field my whole life, this is my whole cause, it's sometimes hard to get out of bed. There are days when I feel that my message, it sounds hollow even to myself. And yet we have to be a bit of optimists. If we weren't, we just wouldn't be able to get out of bed every day. So where do you go for your own personal resilience? Like, where do you get that courage or the personal sort of steel that allows you to get on stage, get up there, do another day's worth of work, knowing that rarely are you thanked and more often you're just slowing a train wreck?
You know, this is a very tricky question, isn't it? But for me, traveling the length and breadth of the Gambia.
It's not a big country.
It's not a big country. But interacting with people, speaking different languages from different cultures. But one thing I always find in common is how we come together as a community when anything happens, including climate disasters. So always seeing the community spirit and how we are always ready to support each other before and during disaster really keeps me motivated, knowing that people really seriously want to take action. The people that are most impacted really want to see effective change. But we have to understand that obviously the solution cannot only come from these people that are impacted. You've mentioned it. We have rich people in the world that obviously need to take more action. We know the solution to the problem. We know what we want to do. It's probably because we don't want to do it, because we don't want to step out of our comfort zone and be more transparent and be more accountable. So what we need, even seeing how communities are always coming together to support each other, is more transparency and more accountability from not only our leaders, but the people that are significantly damaging the environment. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be more expensive to solve the climate crisis. And if we don't solve it now, there's going to be more inequality, there's going to be more hunger, there's going to be more conflict, and at the end of the day, there's going to be more disaster, which will affect people and planet and the prosperity. So we need to see more transparency and accountability from different stakeholders who are the most contributors to the climate crisis.
Yeah, I mean, you're completely right. You know, that I am completely confident that the world and humanity will tackle this at scale eventually. I think the sad part about it is that we will probably experience a lot of pain and suffering that needlessly happens because we are delaying it, right? Because eventually, inevitably, the world and nature will force us to react. Like, you just look at what goes on in Los Angeles, or even in communities I grew up in. I mean, you know, you could say something about the mayor or the governor or this, that. Believe me, what happened in Los Angeles is not something that politicians locally could have done a whole lot about. I mean, the scale of this and the speed of this is not something we ever even knew how to prepare for. You can't deny and prepare for something at the same time. So eventually we're going to be forced to act.
Exactly.
And why not do it when we can avoid a lot of the pain and protect biodiversity and do all the good things and provide jobs instead of waiting at the last minute? Will, where do you get excitement about? I know you go watch rocket launches sometimes, and when they go up and don't blow up on the way, that's exciting. But what makes you get out of bed? I mean, you're so energetic. I see you all the time, and you're such a almost missionary zeal about what you believe in. Where does that come from?
A love of nature, in short, and a sense of justice. I think those two combined. And I think your point about transparency and accountability is what motivates me, because, you know, that we can't fix what we can't see. So the transparency is about arming communities with the information so that they can battle this, right? We can't. But what most gives me hope, going out hiking and just seeing, I mean, we have a twin challenge, the climate challenge and biodiversity loss. And those twin challenges are coupled. Of course, climate exacerbates biodiversity loss and so on. But we've wiped out a lot of our ecosystems. You know, some estimates put up to 70% of life. That's a galling figure, like by population decline. Huge population decline in birds, in insects, in But what gives me hope is how quickly it bounces back when you give it the space. There's a really funny cartoon I saw a couple of years ago during COVID. It was like it's about the bounce back of nature. And in 2019, it was showing the humans walking past the animals in their cages in a zoo. And in 2020, it was the animals coming back onto the streets, walking past the humans in their cages in the houses. But I thought, you know, in a silly way, that depicts the essence that in this little break we gave nature, she came right on back. And so you just need it. And so one of my loves for what the world has agreed to is this 30 by 30 commitment. The commitment of putting 30% of our land and ocean territory into parks or maritime protected areas. Because when we do that, life bounces back in incredible abundance. And you know what? When it does that, the best thing for climate is, of course, more trees. The best technology we have for sucking down CO2 is trees and algae and plankton in the seas. So, i.e., nature's our best tool. So get out of the way. Let nature take that, and she'll suck down a lot of the CO2 back from that we've polluted the atmosphere. And that's what we've got to focus on. And nature gives me inspiration every day. Just go out and take a hike in nature. Gosh, around here, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very nice.
Alicia, so you were asked to come back to government, and you did voluntarily. Politicians don't get much of a break right now. And it's amazing. I always have so much respect when I see politicians who are willing to go in there. I know how hard you work, and I know it's a full-time job. You very rarely get thanks. You nearly always get the criticisms. How do you get up and go to battle and sort of, you know, it's a complex country that you're part of, and as much as you might want something in one way, there's compromise and there's dialogue. So what makes you motivate and keep the hope?
Well, actually, I think one of the things that makes you keep the hope is precisely commitments like 30% of my country has to be protected in 2030. So each time we get 1 hectare or 1 meter on protected areas, I feel that we got something done and that we're going to get there. But the other thing I have to say that gives me a lot of strength is to talk to the indigenous peoples. The indigenous peoples in my country have been there for 500 years, resilient, very resilient, but the most important thing, very knowledgeable. And what they know, and I think this gives me a lot of hope, is the connection between water, biodiversity, and climate, and how much we are not, we are part of that. We are not separate from that. And that's when I think we have the wrong vision, because we feel we can dominate nature. No, 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 no. We are part of nature. So when we talk, we have indigenous peoples, and now they have, by constitution, last month, they were given by constitution the whole rights on their communities, on their land, on their even their ways of justice. So I'm very happy to see that the indigenous peoples in my country are going to be part of a nation with their own, they are nations within our nation, and I think this plurinational concept is very important. So when I talk to them and they give me so much knowledge and so much strength, that for me is wonderful, I have to say.
Fantastic. Thank you. Rosmarie, where does your wellspring of hope come from?
We have a good network with many other organizations, NGOs, and they also look after natural conservation and similar, and we try to be aligned with all of them. We are 1,300 members in our association. Elderly women in Switzerland can take part and join our association. They can support us. We are 9 members in the board, and we try to encourage each other on a general basis. We also are invited frequently. Many people show interest, also people from abroad, and they want to get inspired. That's something that we hear all the time, that we are role models, that we are inspiring other people, other groups as well in other countries, and that, I think, gives us a lot of hope. We also have young people, they want to get involved to some extent, or people who maybe just live their lives, maybe they consume too much, and they're not so interested in the subject. So it's difficult, obviously, to reach them. I look at my grandchildren, they might not always act very environmentally friendly or similar, but our mission is to really reach as many people as possible and to try to communicate what's crucial, or also to give really very concrete ideas on what we can do in everyday life.
I'll just add my perspective to this. You know, it is hard sometimes to wake up, and I've sort of started qualifying my optimism by saying I want to be a conscious optimist. So not just an optimist, but really almost like meditation. When your mind wanders into pessimism, you bring it back. And so there's a consciousness within which you talk about optimism. And whenever I go out in the field, no matter where I am, I see someone in the front row wearing the South Africa colors. And I was recently in South Africa and went and saw some of the projects there. You go into a community where unemployment in the formal sector is 80% or more. And you look at the programs that are being provided where communities are restoring the land, earning a living, having a sense of purpose, and putting things back. Good for biodiversity and good for communities and good for the soil and carbon. It's so empowering. It's so empowering when you meet people, and that program is called sort of Jobs for Nature program there. But I always come back when I go and meet communities, I always come back with the sense of optimism. And my only urging is you still have to live your life. Today you're going to figure out how to get through your day and send your kids to school and do all those things. It's so easy to be overwhelmed by what's out there in the news and to just be forced into paralysis. But when you get into the micro, you find amazing people doing incredible things and finding great hope, courage, and impact in that work. We'll take a couple of questions, but I would ask, please, if you ask a question, obviously your name would be helpful, but make it a question rather than a statement. And I'll do my best to send it to the right person. So we'll take the lady there in the front row, if we'd start with.
Thank you very much. My name is Marvi Mehman. I'm the former Social Protection Minister from Pakistan, and I am the current president of the Legislative Alliance for Women Empowerment Protection. What we do is we turn legislation, women empowerment legislation, into model legislation for the SDGs. And I'm extremely happy to see everyone on this panel, especially I'd like to compliment you, Excellency, on the work that you, as Mexico, Indonesia, and Brazil are doing for mangroves. I come from a mangrove constituency. I have already sent you the book, which is out on the Amazon, so it should reach you on your desk. So I'm not going to represent it to you today. But what I'm saying is, my question is, what is the hope that you see for mangroves? I see a lot of talk in a lot of conferences. We have model legislation which can fix it. Do you see it happening in our time? Because that is the protection wall which will fix a lot of things.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that question. I am very optimistic on mangroves. First of all, I think it's the first time I see in my country conscious about mangroves, and particularly on fishermen. I just had a meeting with 2,500 fishermen and women, of course, that they told me something that it was very impactful for me, because we gave them training on mangroves. And one guy of 70 years old, he came to me and said, "This is the first time in my life as a fisherman that I understand the importance of mangroves for fisheries." So we are going to restore at least 20% of the mangroves of these coastlines in Mexico. I am very optimistic, also because mangroves are sequestering carbon as no other forest. They are the most, I would say, they protect you from climate change, from hurricanes. They help us to sequester carbon. And of course, they are very important for fisheries. So thank you for your question, and I'm very optimistic about mangroves.
The gentleman back there. Mangroves are the hardest working ecosystem
Yes.
on the planet. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Marcio Viegas. I'm the founder of Sustain. Mangroves can sequester carbon, and even planting trees can help. It's key. So, but the climate crisis is here, and this is not the best week to talk about optimism, but here we are. My question is to Madame Bárcena Ibarra. Claudia Sheinbaum is a climate scientist, but unfortunately she didn't much do when she was vice president. So can you give us some optimistic notes on what she's going to do now, especially with you as the Secretary for the Environment? Thank you.
Shall I go ahead?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, we're going to put together a national restoration program that is going to be funded by the government. It's going to have quite a lot of money from investment. Secondly, we have a national IDRIC agreement in which we are asking, or she is asking, the private sector to give up the water that they are not using to put it forward for people, for the communities. And thirdly, we are going to restore 3 of the most contaminated rivers in the country. Almost 80% of the rivers in Mexico are contaminated. So she has given us the instruction to clean up at least 3 of these very big rivers, the Lerma, Tula, and Atoyac, which is a huge amount of, I mean, we are in a turning point. You are right. I mean, we better invest now. And I think Claudia Sheinbaum is very committed to restore forestries, mangroves, and water. Now, the problem is, exactly, the problem, you said it, that we are still an oil producer country. We are still a fossil fuel, let's say, country that we are not stepping out of that yet. And I think this is a big challenge in front of us. And unfortunately, if I may say the last thing, we are importers of natural gas from the US. And now with Trump saying drill, baby, drill, I mean, honestly, I am very worried about the fossil fuel that is going to get into my country through imports. So I'm very pessimistic on that front.
Ma'am? Yep, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Katia Moskowicz, and I'm a science communicator. Just to pick up on that drill, baby, drill, I'm actually also very concerned about Trump's decision to pull out of Paris Agreement. So my question is for the United Nations mainly, but also for the other people here. What is the world going to do now? Because it may be even more serious than the first time when he tried to pull out of the Paris Agreement. How should we react? How can the US react as well? And what are you in the US going to do now once that happens? How can we all pick up the slack and continue fighting climate change once the US is out? Thank you.
Fatou, you want to go? Yeah.
I mean, we should all obviously react because it's something that's very worrying, seeing how US is one of the major emitters and obviously should be one of the countries that should put a lot more in loss and damage and adaptation. And it's really worrying seeing the trajectory because when he was president, they left the Paris Agreement. So from an individual perspective, I actually saw this coming because he did it again, he will obviously do it again. But what I see more, or what I hope to see more, especially from countries, is to scale up the level of financing for loss and damage, because it's quite worrying that every year in negotiations we talk about increasing the annual loss and damage fund. We can't even reach the target of the 100 billion funding annually. So I really hope to see, especially major emitting countries, really taking more responsibilities and efforts, because we can't really allow just one country to dictate how we are supposed to approach the climate crisis. So I'm really looking forward to seeing more countries taking up more actions, especially around the climate financing bit, so we can be able to take more accountability and transparency, especially in our transition towards more renewable energy economies.
Well, you're an American, you want to add to that?
Well, I just wanted to say, I mean, we've got to keep up the fight, right? And the one thing that it inspires me about is the system of the world wasn't on the right trajectory already. Okay, right. So we have big problems irrespective of the US election. And I think that it just should motivate us. The silver lining in a way is more motivation to band together in coalitions to do the right thing. One of the things I'm hopeful for in the United States is more local action. In California, which you can argue is whether or not it's part of the US, it certainly feels different. And I think California is going to take a lot of strong action, almost in particular because of this. And so, look, we've got to keep up the fight.
There's a question in the front row, and then I'll go. I think that's probably.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Sanjayan, for giving me an opportunity. My English is slightly fractured, but my ideas are very profound. I'm not raising the questions because I belong to India, and India have to give the solutions, and we can take the solution from India. In India, there is a proverb: if we take more and we give less, so the day will come when the things will be finished. This is going to happen in the climate change. I really certainly appreciate the World Economic Forum the discussion of climatic change which they are making. Really, it's a world conferences and world concern. My answer in this is like that we have how we can make this climate change as a concern of an individual being. Then the solution will come. And certainly all speakers very nicely told, and the solutions everybody knows. We all sitting here, we know the solutions. I only elaborate a story, small story.
Sorry, sir, I'm just being mindful of time, and I wanted to, I promise.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
And really, my question is how to give this great issue to everybody so that this climate change can be stopped.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So any wise words from any of you about how do I make this deeply personal? Because if people don't act, it doesn't matter what we say about the government. I mean, ultimately we vote. But do you mind saying something about this? Like, how do we make this deeply personal?
I have another answer on Trump. I fear that the climate skepticism is now becoming more important. So maybe people can say, okay, look, the US is leaving the climate agreement. The US won't do anything anymore. So what can Switzerland do? So everybody will just look at the subject from their personal point of view. And that is the big danger. We need to realize every ton of CO2 that we don't consume might help. Every little bit helps. So we can't just say, well, let's not do anything at all anymore.
But time is up. Thank you so much for being. Sorry. Can we take one more? Yes. Sorry, I didn't see it. It's
Good.
So my name is Marlon. I am a student. My question is, do you believe there are action steps or protests which we as the young generation can initiate, in which we get taken seriously without having to destroy? Media coverage today is only based on drama. Where damage is left, people get taken seriously. But if we want peaceful change, our actions and arguments are ignored.
I love to hear from the older generation.
Yeah.
I love to hear from their perspective on this because it's very important.
Well, I can say, I want to say something. Leave your comfort zone. Go out. Work together. I think we can, if we join together forces, we can definitely combat this skepticism on climate change. And I have full confidence on young people, and I know that it's difficult. You did it when you were young. I did it when I was young. We went to the streets. We shout. We wrote letters. We did whatever we could to keep our environment. And we were not, actually, in my time, we didn't have this big challenge of climate change. But still, we were fighting very hard. So we need you guys to speak up, because really we are in serious trouble. I'm an optimistic with, I'm a pessimistic and optimistic with information. That's the problem, you know. We have information, we know we are not doing things right, and that things are not going to be so easy. Europe, it gives me some, I would say, hope. Just listening to Ursula von der Leyen saying that she is going to keep up climate change policies and that industries are going to be given incentives and so forth, that's fine. But you guys have to help us to do our job.
So, I mean, what I would sort of, to your question, you know, in agreeing with my colleagues here, I'd say that drama isn't all bad, right? You do want to get people's attention, and I think the youth are very clever, very genius at that sort of getting the attention. I think the thing to temper that with is that power is sticky. You know, change is really hard. Like, think about the French Revolution, right? So you have this revolution, and then a few years later, the same people are back in power again. Think about the Civil War in the United States. You know, like, think about how long it took after the Civil War to actually have the civil rights sort of actually start happening. So even though sometimes young revolutionaries might think that changes happens quickly, it doesn't. And power has this amazing way of holding on. That's why this intergenerational conversation we had is super, super important. I think that, you know, we've seen the power of youth. I mean, I was here when Greta was here a couple of years, you know, met her here, and I saw that initial wave of catching attention. But it doesn't happen just by catching attention. Companies will do what they think you want to hear, and then they'll go back, because the pressures they have are very, very different. So what my suggestion is, do absolutely what you're doing, but then go deeper and create those alliances with where the power actually rests. Because you're going to need the ministers and the leaders on, you know, from the seniors and the companies and the global south. You're going to need all of it to actually have long-term systemic change, which is ultimately what you want to.
If I can,
thank you.
No, just to add that also this is, you know, we can work on the big institutions and we can work on behavior change. You made, I think, an excellent point, Secretary, that you know, we have to change our attitude. And indigenous people don't see it as separate, ourselves as separate from nature. And when you see yourself as part of nature, you make a different calculus about what you do. Another hope in society is that society can change quite dramatically in short periods of time when we decide, behaviorally, when we decide something is important. We still evidently haven't decided climate is really important. But that's a behavioral shift that could happen very quickly, as has happened on gay rights and women's rights and so many things before. So I think we've got to keep shouting about it until we make those changes. And I think that we could see a big change very quickly in behavior, like flying less or eating less meat and other changes that you can do very simply that have a huge impact on our climate.
Fatou, 30 seconds, last.
A few seconds, yes. I just want to allude to what you said. We are doing what we're supposed to do as young people. We're using social media, we're leading changes, we're leading actions, we are holding leaders accountable, but we also have a limit to what we can do. We can do as much as we can to hold leaders accountable, to continue to work with communities, but it is very important that as different stakeholders, as partners as well, we understand the importance of system change. Because no matter what we do, no matter what action we take, and our allies are not willing to take action, and we are not willing to get out of our comfort zone, to take more ethical behaviors, to shift from the current system that we are in, which is not working for us, then there's going to be a problem. So the ultimate solution is systems change, and that way we can be able to transition better, easier, and more efficiently.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Please give a hand to this amazing man. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think that's right.
Thank you very much, Rosmarie.